Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear speakers, representatives of the ministries, private sector, sector organizations, educational institutions, and international partners. For me, it's a great honor to be greeting you here today. I'm Viviladze, expert on management, governance, and I'll be moderating this webinar on a very important topic, common efforts for successful investment. This is a series of Daria webinars that have just started. This is a new initiative, and this is the first in the series of these webinars on the involvement of employers in the sector, skilled management and development. Today, this is extremely important for Central Asia, likewise for the whole of the world. In the whole of the region, we have already seen a growth in investments in strategic areas, acceleration of green and digital transformations, and the growing demand for qualifications of staff, not only for cheap staff, but also for qualified staff, which is extremely important to be underlined. One of the key conclusions that we got in different discussions in the format of Daria, especially last year during the meeting of high-level groups in Torino, are about the fact that skills development cannot only be done at ministries or educational system, in the educational system. It is absolutely important to create joint platforms for cooperation with employers, sector organizations, and other participants of the labor market. So today we are going to discuss the role of employers and different participants of the labor market in this extremely important format. Our task for today is to not make decisions in particular, but to familiarize ourselves, become aware of different models that exist worldwide and about the best practices that exist in the region, and then think about what is best fit for Central Asia, because we cannot copy any of the models from different other countries, from other international experience, because this should be adapted for the traditions and culture and the specific needs of the region, Central Asia in this case. So in short, our agenda will be the following. After the introductory words from ETF, we will go to the main session. Here we will hear from four different very interesting presentations from different regions. The experience of Slovakia. Then we'll be talking about the dual system in Austria, how it is organized there, the Netherlands model of sector councils, and then we will hear about the very interesting experience from Kazakhstan, Kaz Energy. And after the presentations, we will, of course, have time for discussion and additional questions, and we will be thinking about different issues and questions, especially how it could be, what approach could be valid for the region. Just a couple of organizational things before we go to the next speaker. The webinar will be in Russian and in English language with simultaneous interpretation. Down there you have this small icon of interpretation where you can choose the necessary language that you would like to participate in or hear. We would ask participants to switch off your microphones if you are not speaking or you're not having a speech. This is very important. Questions can be written in chat, or just please wait, because as I said, in the end of the webinar, we will have a session for questions and answers for discussion. I thank everyone for your interest and for participation in today's seminar. And now it is a great pleasure for me to give the floor for introductory words for Ms. Karina Lukacheva from ETF. Please, Katarina.
Hi, hello everybody. Good morning. Good afternoon to everyone joining us from different countries, different time zones. I will be speaking in English today, so if you would need the interpretation, please, as Kaha said, there is a little button down and you can turn on the interpretation. So, I am Katarina Lukacheva. I am a person working on the questions of governance in the ETF. So it is a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of ETF and Daria team, my colleagues that are present here today. As Kaka already said, today we will, let's say, explore together how to work better together, more effectively together for incoming investments and how to make sure that these investments bring sustainable impact. And we will look today at the potential of investments also through the lenses of employers and the sectoral skills governance. So we are starting with a webinar series related to governance issues organized under Daria project, which is an EU-funded project in Central Asia, and through which we work with countries, our partner countries in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan, to support more effective skill systems for employability, for competitiveness, but also for sustainable investment. So I'm also happy to see many of our partners here with us today. Hi, everyone. I am probably not going to say anything new when I say that skill development for employability doesn't happen alone in isolation, and that it takes place within integrated ecosystems. In these ecosystems, we have different groups of stakeholders. We have investors, we have enterprises, we have education training providers, we also have policymakers and public authorities. And these stakeholders operate in coordinated and, let's say, mutually reinforcing way. But to make skill systems truly support economic employment and competitiveness, different actors need to work close together also at implementation level. This means, on one hand, that we need to make sure that the education training, but also labor market institutions function well and are responsive to the needs. But also, on the other hand, it means strengthening the capacities of authorities, social partners, the private sectors, and other human capital development actors, so that this ecosystem can deliver sustainable results. And these elements are also our goal within the Daria project. So across different thematic areas, we support dialogue and cooperation of ministries, institutions and countries, both at national and regional level, to, on one hand, ensure that the policies, skills policies are aligned and ongoing or upcoming reforms are quite coherent. At the same time, we work at the policy level through piloting different methods and tools that help strengthen the system within, be it in the area of qualification, be it in the area of employer survey or labor market monitoring systems or competence-based teaching and learning. So we are working together so that skill systems become more, let's say, responsive to the labor market and investments needs. And we do that especially in sectors that are subject to these inflowing investments, and that energy and transport linked to also global gateway investment strategy of the in the region. So this brings me to the key focus, which is role of employers in the skill system. So this is what we can expect today to discuss. And I just want to highlight that employers are not just one of the stakeholders. They are really central to skill development because they are the first to, experience the real change, the changing technologies, rising demand, or on the other hand, not demand for certain skills anymore. So those are the ones to communicate the changes or the business needs to the policy level, and that's why their engagement is essential. With that, I'll close my welcome. I wish you an enjoyable webinar, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katarina. Огромное спасибо за
Thank you so much for these introductory words that will indeed form our expectations. Now I'm going to the main part of our webinars, that is devoted to the sector approaches, skills development, and participation of different stakeholders. And now the floor is given to our partners from Slovakia, Katalin Lokachova, and we are going to listen a very interesting presentation, how it all works in Slovakia.
I will be speaking with my co-speaker Olaf. We will bring you examples from Slovakia and Estonia. I will start with the Slovakia and then Olaf. Yes, hi Olaf. We will continue with the Estonian example. So we were thinking, before diving into the presentations. Sorry, may I ask to share my slides? Now would be the moment. Before diving into the presentations, I personally wanted to share a story with you, a story of a very little country in the eastern border of European Union, which name is Slovakia, but which economic development is really undeniably linked to investments in the automotive sector. So you may see many of the cars on my introductory slide, but the story really isn't only about cars. It is about how investments and skill system grew and still is growing together, and how trust between the investors and the local skills policymakers make the difference to the story. So why Slovakia? We can move to the next slide. Yeah, Slovakia is quite a strong example of how large foreign investments can transform an entire sector. In this case, we talk about automotive manufacturing. The sector today is largest producer of cars per capita in the world, and this happens in the scale of 48,000 square meters, which is a very tiny portion of the world, and with only 5.6 million people. So it is a backbone of the economy of Slovakia, automotive production. It is also the largest employer. So directly and indirectly, the sector produces around, let's say, 400 to 450,000 of jobs. It is because I'm talking about directly and indirectly, because we have many final producers, but then around these production sites, also dense ecosystem has developed over the years with the growing investments through the spillovers. These included engineering, electronics, or other high-value manufacturing sectors. So if you look at the map on the slide, you can see Volkswagen, you can see Stellantis, Kia, Jaguar, Land Rover, and hundreds of suppliers. I think that the number that I checked last was around 365, and it was still growing. So, yeah, but if you would look at the same map in the early 1990s, it would probably be almost empty. So this transformation happened just in 25 to 35 years. Next slide, please. So why the investors came? In the early 2000s, Slovakia attracted major investments from Volkswagen, then it was PSA, which now is Stellantis Group, and Kia, and there were several reasons for that. First of all, the geographic position that was valuable for the investors, but also, and most importantly, the strong base of technical vocational education that we as a country, I'm saying we because I'm from Slovakia, inherited from the industrial past of the country. This system was able to produce skilled technicians, engineers, but also was able to produce workers that would be, in a way, adapt to the needs of the production relatively quickly. So skills have become kind of a business part of our economy. And I think it is also a reason why it then attracted the whole supply chain, and why Slovakia has become an attractive location for innovation and technology driven investments. At that time, during the transition period in the early 2000s, Slovakia was battling the change from centrally planned to the market economy, which of course is followed by an economic impact. One of them was very high unemployment. At some point, I think around 2001 to 3, the unemployment reached up to 2 digits, so like 19-20%. But what happened when the investments came? So investments were able to meet available skills and then absorb the labor at the scale. So it also had an impact on unemployment that fell relatively quickly after that. To the point where skills became also a kind of a new challenge, because the labor market has become very tight. Companies started to face shortages and of labor, but also of skilled workers. And for that, technological change has also its role, because as you know, automotive sector is very technology intensive, and sometimes the technology used in the production and other stages of the production chain evolves much faster than maybe the skill system is able to catch up. And this was exactly the situation that around, I think, before the crisis periods, 2009, 2010, Slovakia was in. So that was a key moment when employers began to act, and companies like Volkswagen, Kia started to train workers themselves. They introduced in-company training and partnership with several schools. Not that they were not doing it before, but now the scale was higher. But all these solutions were fragmented and to big extent also influenced by different national training traditions. So we know that the German training system is different, has different priorities, and the French one, for instance. And at some point in the history, we could also see a regional division of training provision. So the key turning point came during the crisis periods, as it always sometimes happens when a big institutional change comes. And those were the years around 2009, then 2011, up to 15, when a systemic response came. And okay, the stakeholders said, and by stakeholders, I mean both investors and also the government institutions, ministries, and so on. They said, okay, we cannot do this alone. We need to work on a skills formation that would be anticipating skills and not just reacting on the needs for skills. So that's when the institutionalization and the embeddedness really has taken off. And in 2015, Slovakia has introduced like a proper dual education system through the VET law. And from that moment on, employers were not only the users of the skills, but also kind of co-creators of the system. And apart from that, apart from the training provision that you can see on the slide here, and I'm not going to go into detail, it was just for your information. Apart from the training provision, they also started to become part of the skills policy development through sectoral governance structures. We can move to the next slide. They have been members of employer association called the Zväz automobilových priemyslov, which summons not only majority of the producers and suppliers, but also schools, interestingly. So they can shape the sectoral vision kind of altogether. Through this membership, they have been granted access to national tripartite, which is like the main policy body to consult and make policy decisions together with the unions and the trade unions and the government. And I have to say that especially during certain economic downturns and crisis periods, they were able to use this mechanism quite well and introduce flexi measures. So, for instance, an institutionalized flexi measures, for instance, Kurzarbeit, which is like the flexi working scheme, Flexiconto, but also compulsory training measures related to digitalization, or at least this is what I remember when I used to study these discussions. And then on the sectoral level, they became gradually more involved in qualification development and update of curricula with the main vet authority. I have to say also that the sectoral skills, the sectoral dialogue has not been that strong, but this is also one of the legacy that we have from the past. And that's because the sectoral social dialogue in automotive is still organized in the machinery and manufacturing, which kind of creates a mismatch because automotive is special part of, let's say, the machinery industry with much higher working standards, much higher wages. So let's say the discussions were not so helpful for the automotive. Maybe we can move to the next slide. So by saying this, I don't want to say that this is a success story. There is a lot of pitfalls on the way. And there are many skills challenges on the way. For instance, with the digitalization, we see again the pressure on the skills change. For instance, I mean, I don't know if I have time, but maybe very quickly, the smiling curve is what you are looking at, which impact is not so smiley. But around 2018, 16, 17, 18, there has been this big discussion after the automation study by Frey and Osborne, saying that the digitalization or robotization will replace all the middle skilled jobs in automotive production. And the idea was that the more accessible technology employment in the production processes, be it many stages, either R&D, design, logistics, production, logistics again, marketing or services, that the value added per skill in the production part, which is the heart of the assembly line, let's say welders, etc., will become redundant, and that will basically need people in R&D, design, marketing, and services, and logistics, of course. And of course, press and also politicians and the general public picked up on that, and there was a big worry in the Slovak society, but this didn't materialize. And what I think happened is that employers being involved in the embedded institutionalized structures and having this community of exchanges among themselves, but also with the education institutions, were able to kind of figure out maybe not systematic approach to it, but their own digitalization skills related strategies in the plans. So to finalize and to set the tone maybe for discussions of today, we can move to the next slide. I wanted to, by bringing Slovakia at the beginning, I just wanted to say that investment can scale a sector, but the quality and the sustainability of this growth really depends on how the skills are governed and where employers are engaged from the stage of identifying skills needs to the training delivery, because that really creates trust between the stakeholders and the local public authorities. So, and everybody's happy. That's all from my side. And now I would like to give word to Olaf to share also his story. Olaf, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katarina, for inviting me to this window of opportunities. Let's have my slide, first slide. Уважаемые коллеги, я перехожу на русский язык.
Dear colleagues, I'll switch to Russian. Some of you might know that my main professional training is system engineering. So I'm used to see systems everywhere, in every single thing, starting from the national system of qualifications, that I was involved in the development of which I was involved in my country of Estonia like 30 years ago. But in my short presentation, its essence is not to take you through the architecture of the system of national qualifications, but mostly to shed light on the system aspects that exists. Next slide, please. Any system is composed of certain components, but it becomes actually a system after these components become linked in between each other inside this system. So let us see on the example of this slide what are the main elements and what formed the national system of qualifications. First, the legal framework for the system is ensured by the government and the parliament. They define the strategic area, the direction of movement of the system. The operationalization of the system is up to the next actors. In Estonia, these actors were, first of all, the Estonian Qualification Agency, where I was involved as economic advisor, and the Department of Education and Youth. The Estonian Qualification Agency is responsible for the development of professional qualification standards and assignment of professional qualifications. Department on Education and Youth is responsible for ensuring the quality of providers of education and training. Jointly, these two institutions are responsible for the operational definition of the system of qualifications. Where I would like to put more focus of attention, dear colleagues, is that the governance, management of these institutions, I mean the department and the qualification agency, involves representatives of stakeholders. And the stakeholders are not only the employers. Equally interested are such parties as employees and employers of different organizations. Stakeholders are as well providers of education and training, particular educational institutions, and their participation in these governance bodies is extremely important. Our today's attention is focused on sector councils. This is what you see in the yellow box down there. What I would like to draw your attention to as well is the thing that the sector councils are not working in a vacuum or isolated. It is very important to ensure coordinated operation of these councils. And for that, in Estonia, we have special coordination council composed of chairman and sectoral councils.
So can I have the next slide, please? The next slide allows us to see in more details the way we organize work. So we have seen the coordinating council board, and then we have a line of sectoral boards. There's 14 of them, 1-4. And again, this is a rather detailed system which has more than 20 authorities that award qualifications. They use professional qualification standards, and they ensure professional validation for those who declare interest in this. And again, just like at the higher level, and in the sectoral boards and qualification boards or commissions, we have three main groups of stakeholders. These are representatives of employers, representatives of those who work in the sector or subsector, and we also have professional associations or the association of those who work in a particular area. And we have a balanced representation of stakeholders, which is one of the principles on which the national qualification system is based. Now, the last slide, please. There's one thing that I would like to underscore once again. The stakeholders of the national qualification system is not limited by political rhetorics. We see a balanced representation and participation of all stakeholders. Why is this important? This is important because this is the way interest is created as well as the feeling of ownership. And we see here the experience of Estonia and of other countries that went through this difficult path. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Katarina, and thank you, Olaf, for very interesting presentations. Those presentations are important for us because we're now talking about the context of Central Asia and the countries, Slovakia, Estonia. They started to process the system, change it. And I would like to commend these countries because they are good examples of the way these things could be developed further. And Slovakia in particular shows how investments and industrial development depend on the underlying system of qualifications and on the confidence in the system, particularly when it comes to highly qualified labor force. That is why the participation of employers, and as Mr. Olaf underscored, of other stakeholders is very important for establishment of a competitive skills development system. Now we are going to see other models. We're going to see Austrian model, which is a good example of the way things are institutionalized in the vet system and how the system interacts with the employers. We see this dual education, which is very popular. There is already a multi-annual tradition here, and I'm happy to offer the floor to Stefan Praschel from Austria. He will present the traditional model, which works very well in Austria. So you have the floor, Mr. Praschel.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. And I'm very happy that I can present you our dual system and how we work together with our employers. I concentrate really just on the dual system at the moment because we also have a full-time vocational school system, but I think the highest involvement of employers we have in the dual system. Can I get the first slide, please? Maybe just a few words about me. My background is chemical engineering, and I worked as an in-company trainer for 13 years in a big industry company, and then I changed to the Federal Economic Chamber, and since more than 20 years, I work together with employers to develop the training regulations for companies. The next slide, please. In that slide, you can see how that normally works. Step one, there's an initiative. Most of the time, the initiative comes from companies or sector organizations. As Katarina mentioned, new technologies need to be implemented and things like that, or totally new fields of occupations are needed. For example, 2 years ago, we implemented the vegetarian cook. So because more and more people are vegetarians, we have more vegetarian restaurants. So the occupation was the vegetarian cook. It was an initiative by some companies. Okay. And then the next thing, if there's initiative, we need to develop the training, the regulations that we work together with experts from the employers, and just to list which competences do we need in that skill. When he or she is a skilled worker, what does she have to do the whole day? Which competences are needed? So that's what we call the training regulation for the companies. And maybe just a step back, we have two ministries who are responsible for the dual system. One is the Ministry of Economy. So the main ministry for the dual system is the Ministry of Economy, and not the Ministry of Education. So because 80% of the work time, the apprentice is in the company, and just 20% is in the part-time vocational schools. So two ministry. The first one, Ministry of Economy, is responsible for the training regulation in the company, and the Ministry of Education makes the curricula for the part-time vocational school. Of course, that should fit together. So when we have the training regulations, when we have a concept, the next step will be the Federal Advisory Board to on the apprenticeship training. The Federal Advisory Board is based on or maintained out of the social partners. You have the employers there, you have the trade unions there, and also the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Education are part of that advisory board. So in that advisory board, the training regulation will be discussed again. Everything, is it correct? Should we add something? Do we need to delete something? Until there's a consensus. And then the Federal Advisory Board sends the documents, the training regulation, to the Ministry of Economy. And at the same moment, the Ministry of Education develops the curricula. And that it will be a legal document in Austria describing the training regulations and the curricula for the part-time schools. And so after some years, 5-6 years, we also do an evaluation of the apprenticeship, just to ask ourselves, did we do the right things? How does it work? Is something wrong? Do we need to adjust something? Also in the development, we discuss how long should the apprenticeship be. Normally in Austria, you have the possibility of 3 years, 3.5 years, or 4 years. Depends on the content, of course, of the training regulation. We also discussed the duration of the apprenticeship. Next slide, please. Just some figures that you can see where the apprenticeship are. And we have in the craft and trades, that's a department of the chamber. The craft and trades is, of course, with the small and medium-sized enterprises, and they have 42% of all the apprentices. In tourism, we have, let me see, around 7%, transport logistics 3%, banking, insurance 1.7%. So the biggest training institutions are the industry and craft and trades, just to get a feeling where the apprentices are. And maybe I forget at the beginning, I always talk about the Federal Economic Chamber. In Austria, every company has to be member of the chamber. There's no choice. So it's mandatory that every company is member of the chamber. So this gives the chamber a power, and that's why the chamber has such a critical role in the development of the dual system. The next slide, please. Just to show you where the girls and the boys are choosing their apprentices. And you see the girls, the favorite occupation is the retail trade, then office assistant, hairdressing, and so on and so on. And with the boys, you can see it's electric engineering, metal technology, motor vehicle engineering, of course, and so on and so on. So typically male occupations and typically female occupations. We work on that to get a better mix, but it's not that easy, and I guess it's the same everywhere. Next slide. Yeah, as I mentioned first with the step one, there is a desire to develop or to modernize an apprenticeship. We try every 5 to 8 years, we try to have a look at the existing apprenticeships and try to modernize them, or we develop totally new ones like the vegetarian cook. Then if there's a desire or an idea, we form a working group within the sector organizations or across the sector organizations, depending on the occupation, with experts and the chamber. We work on the training regulations. And as I said, we have considerations regarding the required knowledge and skills, which should be in the training regulation, the duration, as I mentioned before, and are there overlaps with existing skills and so on. Yeah, we have to think about that. And for the ministry, the next slide, please. We need to develop a paper, which we call the statement of purpose, to explain to the ministry why do we do that, what do we expect, what we want to achieve with the new occupation. Then, of course, we need the training regulation and the relationship regulations. It sounds a little bit strange, but in between the occupations, there are relations overlapping of 1 or 2 years. So if you're going to change the occupation, maybe you get 1 year credit or 2 year credits. So we just have to define that. So we need 3 documents for the ministry, which we have to develop. Next slide, please. Yeah, as we said, what we do together with the working group, we work on those 3 documents. Of course, the main document is the training regulation, because that document tells the company what do I have to train my employee. And yes, also the next step is that we talk to the employee side, of course, because we need the agreement in the Federal Advisory Board. And then the Ministry of Education also starts to think in which school maybe we can give that occupation, which country, and so on and so on. Next. And before we come to the Federal Advisory Board within the chamber, we need to find an agreement. If there are more than one sector organization is involved, when we need agreement in the whole chamber, that makes it a little bit difficult and long-lasting sometimes. And as soon as we have the agreement in the chamber, we go to the Federal Advisory Board. And then the negotiations between the employers and the employee-stat, which means the chamber, trade unions, and also expert from the sector organizations. So those are the social partners, and they need to agree on the proposed training regulation. Yeah, the next slide, please. As soon as we have the agreement in the Federal Advisory Board, the documents or the training regulation will be forwarded to the Ministry of Economy. And as I said before, in the meanwhile, the Ministry of Education starts to develop a curriculum which fits to the training regulation. And then there's a next legal step in Austria that those documents have to be circulated in whole Austria for a last examination. If that is done, then the curriculum and the training regulation will be a legal document issued by the two ministries. So that can take 1 year or 2 years or more years. We try to be fast, but just with all the legal steps and all the discussions between the experts, it takes some time. But the system is, for me, working quite well, because it's really adjusting to the needs of the companies very quickly. And the employers or the companies, they really have a say in for the contents of the training regulation, because as I said before, 80% are the youngsters in the company, and the companies are responsible for the training. So that's why there's really a demand of the companies to have up-to-date training regulations. And we have at the moment more than 200 apprenticeships in Austria. And as I said before, we try to update them regularly. And every year I think we can update or implement around 20 apprenticeships every year, 20 to 25. So yeah, that's in a nutshell how that works in the dual system. As I said before, it's really based on the social partners and the two ministries. And I think someone mentioned at the beginning, you cannot just copy a system to another country. You also have to have the basic or the framework, the existing framework, and those are the social partners in Austria, which are very important for that. And that's the base. Without the social partners or the chamber, that wouldn't work that way. So you would need another system. But it works quite well in Austria, and yeah. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope there will be more questions later on.
Спасибо огромное, господин Прашел, за
Thank you very
очень
much, Mr.
интересную
Prashel. The presentation
презентацию,
was very interesting.
и особенно за последние развития.
Particularly, thank you for
Мы
presenting
видим
the
такой
latest
аспект, и
developments.
очень интересные акценты насчет
And it's
тесного
very
сотрудничества
interesting what kind
между
of
экономикой и
emphasis you
образованием,
laid,
особенно между министерствами, и за тесную координацию.
and thank you
Австрийский опыт
for
очень
telling us
характерен,
about the
что эффективное
coordination.
участие работодателей
Austrian experience proves very well that efficient
не
participation of the
основано только на разовых
employers
консультациях,
is
о
not
которых уже
based
все
on
говорили, между
individual
отдельными организациями
consultations only. This is a
общества.
formalized mechanism of
Это
cooperation,
очень важный пример
and it is a
для
very important
системного
example
социального
for
партнерства,
the
как вы уже отметили.
systemic social partnership,
Уже поступают
as you have mentioned
вопросы, потому
already.
что
And questions are coming in.
наш вебинар очень-очень интересен.
Our webinar is very
Беспрецедентно
interesting.
интересен, я сказал бы. Мы
The
вернемся к
interest
этим
is
вопросам в конце, когда у нас
unprecedented,
будет сессия вопросов
and
и
we will
ответов,
come back to the
конечно.
questions when we have the Q&A
Возникал
session.
один вопрос госпоже Катерине или
There's
Олаф.
just one
Пожалуйста,
question
готовьте
to
ваш ответ. И
Katerina
был
and
бы очень
Olaf.
если мы поделимся с
Get
презентацией, я
ready
думаю,
to
что
respond.
проблем не будет.
And there was also about a question about sharing presentations. I don't think it's going to be a problem because that is an interesting thing. Now, let us move to the next presentation. A very interesting approach. All sectoral boards play a consultative role and an analytical role and coordinating role. Now I invite Pasqualino Mare to share a very interesting experience of the Netherlands.
Hello, Dobry den, everybody. Hello, I will speak in English. I'm a colleague of Katerina. The reason why I'm here is that I have some experience in sector skill councils, both when I worked in the Netherlands, 15 years, and also in some countries of ETF countries. And for the moment, I am deeply involved in establishment of sector skill councils in Egypt. What I would like to ask you, dear participants, when you listen to me is, and I think you should do that when you listen to everybody, is to which extent what is told and presented can be applied in my context, and what do I need in order to apply, and is it applicable? I think this is a very, very important question when you listen to best practices. Because as was said, you cannot copy. We say that already for 100 years. But the difficulty is what conditions need to be met in order to involve employers in the process. It was said, and this is evidence-based, the success factor in reforms, and this has been confirmed by studies, is that reforms in TVET will only succeed if you have real involvement of employers at all levels, among other conditions, of course. So what I will do now is I will explain you a little bit how they do it in the Netherlands, which is not applicable in Central Asia nor in Egypt. I will also give some examples what is in Egypt, and also make reference to a global study that is comparing also sector skill councils all over the globe. In the Netherlands, next slide, if you can show my slides, please, yes. Next slide. Yes, in the Netherlands, we talk about social partners. The Austrian colleague have been mentioning that social dialogue. Now, you know very well that social dialogue, or you don't know, it is typical something from the West, from Europe. Social dialogue, it's a model where parties talk to each other, confront each other, and they take decisions. It is a Western model, which is not always applicable in other cultural contexts, especially in Egypt. Social dialogue is a very difficult issue. I put aside even the involvement of unions or social partners. Strictly given, you have employers, unions, and also government, tripartite. So this is not a given. It is very important to understand that if you want really a social dialogue model, you need to work on it and you need to be prepared. And this is related also to trust building, trust building between the partners. And this is, I think, a very, very important, I would say, premises to include also social dialogue processes and skills development policy. In the Netherlands, this has been, next slide, please. This has been historically present, and they call it, they have a special name for that. They call it the Poldernaya model. And you know what the Poldernaya model was? Where the word comes from? It's from the word Poldernaya. And the Netherlands is a country that is basically underwater, under the sea level. And at the time, the parties had to work together to make sure that things were safe. The organizations that were handling the water management, the government, the companies, and they were obliged to work together to solve this problem. And this is why they call it the Poldernaya model. I say it in Russian, the Polder model, and which stands basically for, okay, we talk to each other, we try to have a consensus, and we find a solution. This is a little bit the model of a social dialogue culture. And this is the reason why it is put in the slide. I will not read what is in the slide. You can read it yourself. But at the end, it is about trust. Trust between employers. And if you go to skills between employers and other institutions, supply side, demand and supply side. We can go to the next slide. Now, in the Netherlands, as I said before, you have different models, and this is also related to what I'm saying now, but it is also related to the economic situation of the country. Yeah? You have developed country, you have transition country, you have emerging country, you have fragile countries. And in the Netherlands, which is a developed country, the integration of sector bodies is very much integrated in terms of producing knowledge. In Egypt, for example, we are not that far, not at all. In Egypt, we are working on trying to establish the involvement of employers to sector skill councils in a systematic, formal way, and in order to produce some limited outputs. So there's a big difference between what sector skill councils do in the Netherlands and what sector skill councils will do in Egypt. Becoming a knowledge center, we are far from that. But in the Netherlands, it works like that. If you go to the next slide, it will be better illustrated. It's another slide. I will come back to that later. Basically, it's the pyramid that I have in my slides. I wanted to put it before, but I will show you this one. Now, yes, how does it work in the Netherlands? When I worked there were 30 sector skill councils. 30 for each sector. And each sector had its own governing board, its own structure, its own staff, everything. They were working quite, let's say, independent within a sort of legal framework. And this legal framework said to them, okay, listen, guys, what the sector skill councils need to do is do a number of things. One is you have to make sure that the qualifications, they had to produce qualifications. This was one legal task. It still is in the new structure. But the qualifications were delivered by the employers. So outside the sector skill councils, there were the employers associations, sectoral, that are part of the board, and they were obliged to deliver occupational standards according a template. So they said to the sector skill council, here are the jobs, here are the standards. And what the sector skill council did, they translated it in qualifications. This was one task. A second task was that a sector skill council needs to contribute to the quality of work-based learning. And when I say work-based learning, in the Netherlands, you have two types, sort of dual system and school-based. And the sector skill councils, they had to go to the companies, look in the companies if they may meet the quality of being an apprenticeship company, train the tutors, and then formally accredit the companies. The schools, the vet schools, they can only send their trainees to accredited companies by the sector skill council. So this was a second legal, let's say, obligation. The third one is that sector skill councils produce reports, sort of reports where they put in the report what is existing now, what will come, what are the emerging skills. So a number of data, what probability do you have if you choose for this qualification to find a job, how many workplaces you have at the regional level, there you have the regional dimension, because in a country also in Central, you have different regions, you have different economic realities, different demands. So these are the three legal, let me put this way, legal outputs that sector skill councils need to deliver. But now they have reformed it. The legal outputs are still there, but they have restructured the whole system. Why? Because it was becoming a little bit inefficient. There was no transparency, coherence was missing, and the Dutch government wanted to save some money. And the schools were not, they were always fighting with the sector skill council. So you see that there is an evolving model. And you see that in every sector skill council around the world, that it evolves. And this is the reason why you have to start, especially if you're a transition country, you have to start with modest outputs, modest ambitions. What do you want to deliver? And not immediately over ambitious your objectives. So in the Netherlands, what they did is they put the sectors together. And there they make the distinction between sector chambers and market segments. If you go to the next slide, please. Yes, this I've explained. Go to the next. Yes, this one, you see. So what I did is I have put sectors together. I will give an example. One of the chambers is the technology and the built environment construction sector, the environment sector. Another one is the health, welfare, and sports sector. So they have put big sectors together without ignoring also the specialties of the sectors. Because if you take, for example, the commerce sector, in the commerce sector where I worked, you have the wholesale, international trade, commerce, and they have now also the fashion industry and the textile industry. It is obvious that each subsector has a specificity. So this is the reason why you have also the market segments. The market segments are the specific subsectors in where they are going to develop the qualifications, specific qualifications for the specific subsectors. So they have organized it in this way. And in the chambers, you have the board, representatives of employers, sectoral employers of all sectors. You have representatives of the supply side, the Ministry of the schools. And in the Netherlands, the vocational education is very decentralized. Big schools with a lot of autonomy, and they have their own association. So they are represented in that. The Ministry of Education is delegating a lot of competences to the field, and this is the reason. And you have also the unions. But as I said before, in most countries where I work, the involvement of unions is a difficult matter for different reasons that I mentioned. So we go to the next slide. Yes, basically, if you put it from this perspective, sector skill councils in the Netherlands, which is put in one organization, they work on the input side, the process side, and also the output side. The input side, as I said before, and this is the most difficult thing for sector skill council, is how do you gather data, information to transfer the knowledge. In some countries where you don't have data resources, in developing country, you have everything. If you go to Egypt, they don't have a labor market information system yet. Where do you get your data? Do you do meetings with employers like they do now? They choose 10 companies, they do a chat, and then they pretend that they have input from the employers. So where do they get data? So this is a very important condition if you want to have performance sector skill councils, that you have a number of resources that you can use to transform data, information, sectoral information into knowledge. And when I say knowledge, transform it to occupational standards, transform it to sector reports, and then go to qualifications. This is, I think, one of the biggest challenges. And for that, you need also sector skill councils that are motivated, employers that are trusting the system. And then at a certain time, they will produce outputs. They will deliver the input for the education sector, for the supply sector, that will make qualifications translated into curricula, into training programs, into assessment, where also employers can be involved, by the way. They are involved, but I'm just putting from the focus on the sector skill council. And then you have to make sure that it is very well implemented, because you can produce as a sector skill council a paper, you give it to the education sector, for example, Egypt, and if they don't have the good teachers and they don't have the good assessment procedures, and you don't have the good companies where they do apprenticeships, it will have no values. And what will the employer say? What the hell am I doing in the sector skill council? So in other words, the sector skill council are part of a machine, big machine. I always put it as a machine with gears, and every part of the machine has a function. And if a part of the machine does not work, the machine will not deliver what you expect from the machine. And this is the big challenge when you introduce employers into a system. You have to tell them that they are part of a machine, and to have to demonstrate that the machine will produce what the machine is intended to produce. Please do the next slide. I think I will skip into this. Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, this one. Yeah, this one. This one is what I said before. You see, you have this triangle at the highest level. You see the pyramid with basically the advice, the intelligence, the knowledge that is produced following the whole process. And underneath, you see these bulks, and these are the sources that you have. So in Central Asia, when you establish a sector skill council, you have to think about it. You have to think about it. What has a sector skill council has to deliver? And I advise you not to be too ambitious. My advice to you would be focus on occupational standards and sector reports. And then you have to ask yourself, in order to have these reports and these standards, what do I need to do it? Where do I get the information? Do you have the capacity to do that? Do you have the funding? Do you have the mandate? Do you have the associations that are motivated, the employers that are motivated to come into the sector skill councils? So there are a number of conditions that you need to prepare before in order to establish a sort of plan where you want to come to concrete results and outputs that will feed into in the machine of the policy system. So this would be my advice. I can send you a study where they compare transition country with economic emerging country, developing country, and you see also how it is developed. For example, in the UK, they had an employer-led sector skill council system, and it changed totally because funding disappeared. You see in countries that think, in India, everybody's talking about India. India is a model where sector skill councils had a lot of money, and also in South Africa, a lot of money. They have Levi funds. But what you see there is that the money is not used for what it is intended to. You see a deviation towards, even in South Africa, towards corruption. And I met people from CETA, from the organization lately, and they said that they're going to reform it. So sector skill councils is an evolving model. So you start with something achievable, quick wins, return of investment, and then you see how it evolves. And then you can expand the function of sector skill councils in a larger way. This is the advice that I would give you if you want to implement sector skill councils in a country. And using, of course, the experience like in the Netherlands, of Austria, of other countries, how it is. I think I'm going to stop here and not to go further into details. If you have questions, please do. Thank you.
Спасибо, господин Маре. Это очень-очень важно, тот опыт,
Thank you very
который вы
much,
имеете.
Mr. Mare. Your experience is very important, particularly because you have underscored different approaches in different countries. And it is quite natural that the approach of Egypt is different compared to the approach of the Netherlands. And we must also mention that such sectoral councils are not the only kind of platforms that can exist in cooperation, but this is a very good example. And it is particularly important that the participation of employers is actually built into the system. It is a prominent element. I particularly mean here the Netherlands module. They analyze labor market data, they update qualifications, they work with the data, which is particularly important. And they coordinate practical training. And their role is indeed big. We must develop such models, or we need to choose, as you said it from the very beginning. We need to see which model is appropriate for Central Asia at this point. Now we are getting to know different opportunities. Thank you very much again for the very interesting presentation. Please stay with us because we're definitely going to have an interesting Q&A session. Now, let us jump to the experience of Kazakhstan. Thank God we are not starting from scratch. And it's good that we have some basis for good cooperation. Now it is particularly important to see the regional experience of Central Asia. We need to see how similar mechanisms are already developing. So now I invite the representative of a very important organization, Kaz Energy. And Lezat Akhmurazina, the CEO of Kaz Energy, she will talk to us about the achievements of Kazakhstan. Thank you for the participation, and we are listening carefully. Distinguished participants, thank you for the floor. My name is Lezat Akhmurzina, and I represent the Association of the Employers. We call them unions of employers or the associations of legal entities. Our association is the biggest in Kazakhstan. We bring together the employers of the energy sector, including oil and gas. Can I please have the slides on screen? Thank you. Next, please. So briefly, as the moderator said, we are gaining power in terms of building experience in developing qualifications and establishing a system. And as you can see, this format is the current format, and we have built it in 2012, so quite recently. That's the time when the law on professional qualifications has been enacted. And there are some peculiarities. Sectoral councils, as the previous speaker has said, are not very ambitious at this point. We do not want to scare people. We want to bring order to our own occupations, and we want to develop professional standards. We do not call them professional and qualification standards. We call them professional standards. And the composition of the council is also determined and stipulated in the law. This is done to institutionalize the concept of the sectoral qualifications themselves. We see the state authority participating. We have this National Chamber of Entrepreneurs. This is the National Authority for Professional Qualifications, which connects us in the country. We also have our employers, the unions, and the associations, and also the educational establishments, higher education establishments and colleges. They are separate because there are different authorities responsible for them. Our council, as the law says, has been created in 2023 based on the procedures that have been created for this. Can I have the next slide, please? So, based on our data, we have more than 50 sectoral councils, 50. And based on the structure of the industry, the volume of work in the industry, on the sectoral composition of the industry, the sector can be run by one or several councils. Just to make things clear, Kaz Energy, that I represent, is the chair for the energy sector, oil and gas, and oil processing industry. And we have another authority, which is called Commission for Labor Relations, This is the commission that preserves the three-party structure in the labor relations, and qualifications are the social part of employment, and they also generate revenues for people. So the unions and the employers and the state participate in all authorities. We decided to synchronize them because there's an issue in the payment of labor, sectoral coefficients, and other things, and they are all related. We want everything to be synchronized. So if we discuss something in the authority, everything has to be synced.
Here on the next slide, this is how we basically as an association see the role of the sector councils. Not only the role, but also what we can say, how we worked, and the challenges that we had. The first thing that we have to say here is that it's quite difficult for us because, as the speaker from Estonia mentioned, why we need to involve all the stakeholders and interested parties. This is where we started. We said that we are open, and education institutions, employers, everyone who feel themselves attached to our, who relate to our sector can be involved. And as of today, we can say that this is a live flow of experts, live flow of specialists, and every time we need to once and once again explain the logic of working in the area, why these issues aren't the responsibility of the Ministry of Labor, why this is with the Ministry of Energy, what is the role of education institutions in each of the questions that are being discussed. And we understood that this is a constant need of increasing the capacity of the members of the councils. And our councils, it's just recently, not a short time ago, we finished the last meeting that we had, and we invited the body that is curating us nationally, and we always invite them to provide the necessary information. It's very difficult when from the state authority you do not have a nice systemic coordination, because you need to have this core. The core that you trust, the core that you believe in, and that will be able to govern, to manage all this process. And if from the responsible state authority that's in this particular role, we do not have this, then the sector council becomes a very weak process. And we unfortunately even saw councils that throughout whole year would not have a single meeting and not make any decisions. And to not have the same in our association, we are preparing our own experts, strong experts that would be able to, by their voice, by their decisions, to promote the questions and issues that are needed, critically needed in the sector. The same continuity, because we have a lot of rotation in the state authorities and in expert bodies, and ours in the association, which has little rotation, is the trade unions and education institutions, while the state authorities and the employers, they very often have this rotation, the change in staff, and very often we lose our experts just because they go to some other place and they would no longer have it in their competence. Different level of activity of the sector councils and employers is about the thing that these are exactly the actors that are quite actively involved in the discussions, who are promoting certain skills that they deem to be relevant, while others do not think them active, they would take only a part of them. And in time, they get used to the thing that this is their own professional standard. They start treating us as their own child and do not allow doing any changes or amendments to it when somebody else comes into the process. But that, on the other hand, means that on the one hand, it means that they're very involved, actively involved. On the other hand, this is subjectively difficult because you have to always explain that this is not your job description, this is not your subdivision, this is not a job description. This actually is a job description, but it should be for the whole of the sector and should be understood and clear for the whole of the sector, to everyone. And the fifth thing that we encounter is when we come up with a new skill, it's nice when it's a unique skill, like some skills on the offshore or mining or about freezing of the elements. When the small company comes, we just explain them everything and they give their comments. But when a skill comes, we come up with a new skill and we need to see who is going to work, how many of them we have to have. Sometimes it's difficult to find this information, specific information. But for us personally, it's very helpful that we get all the requests from the Ministry of Education. They are the members of our board, and this is very convenient because both the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Higher Education, they're also members of our council. They are the ones who curate the preparation of staff. But anyway, I think that we would like to have even more valid, relevant information, because what we have either from the analytical sectors of our ministries or from anywhere else, the experts are comparing it with the statistics that is provided by the education institutions, universities. Now, in the next slide. By this, we are just trying to say that we used to have 4 councils. I said that one state authority can curate several councils, and the council that we are in, KazEnergy, is the first one. This is oil and gas, chemical and oil processing sectors. This is a separate one. Processing is a separate primary and secondary, and oil, gas, and chemistry are also there. And the last is transportation of gas. There's monopoly for this in our country, and the functionality, the chart is a little bit different there. We also have a sector council for energy, and one more council that just opened recently this year, the sector council for renewables. Alternatives are also included there. So these 2 councils, like our councils in the oil, gas, and processing and chemical, chairmen of the councils are mostly representatives of the employer associations, like me. I'm a representative of the employer association for oil, gas, processing and chemical. In the sector council for energy, they also have the Kazakh Energy Association, and in the renewables, from what I remember, they have there's some other name for it, but it's also an employers association. And the chairman mostly are the representatives of the association, while deputies of the chairman are deputies of the first leaders of state authorities. These are mostly vice ministers, deputy ministers, and this is also established provided for in the legislation. Now, this slide, we are trying to tell how what was the progress for 2025. The energy line, we are the council number 1 in the country, because we planned a certain number of professional standards, which is about 400 professions, including update and new titles. And execution is 95%, more than 95%. Some professions, some titles are still there, but some became obsolete, and we analyzed them separately. And there are some jobs that, after some discussions, we took them from the Atlas of New Professions, like computer chemical engineering, something like that. And they were accepted, but those that were not accepted, upon discussion, we excluded them from the process of development. Next slide. This one we are not going to stop by for a long time. This is just the dynamics for the development of our oil and gas council. I thought it would show all at once. I'm sorry for this gradual show up. So you see, in 2023, we only identified our composition because according to the legislation, it should be, according to a certain procedure, you should apply with the make a request, you should support and confirm your experience, and where you support is the Ministry of Energy. So we understood that because these are three areas, different areas, we needed to divide them into narrower areas of specialization. So we developed working groups, and the working groups came out to be quite big and narrowly specialized. And there we started discussing certain skills, meaning excluding or including them in the atlas. And eventually we had to approve certain normative documents based on which we were going to continue our work. Annexes, orders, and so on. 2024. We came up with the first plan that we started implementing and started involving universities, meaning 2024, 2025, we had quite close active cooperation with our major profile universities in the countries. They met many of our professors and doctors of sciences, and they were quite actively involved in making the job descriptions, particularly in the skills part and in the necessary amount of knowledge. A lot of discussions, a lot of debate, but we managed to come to a conclusion. Next slides are about following years. This is just to show that this is quite a new format for us. We do not have 10 years of experience. That's why we have to show year by year what we achieved. And since we have the topic of the role of employers in the development of systems of qualifications. So in 2024, after the first year of activity, we realized that we need to train our experts. And this training started with our Center for the Development of Labor Resources. Can we have the next slide, please? Right away. Yes, so 2025, last year, we had 17 meetings of the working groups and 4 meetings of the sector council. It was very difficult because getting together all the sector specialists in Zoom, discussing all the questions was quite difficult. But we got a nice result by the end of the year. So this year, in January, we already had a major event of the sector council, and we finalized the 6th meeting now of the sector council. Because in the beginning of the year, we got a request of too many changes, and we needed to cope with it and had to make changes to our plans. Now, in the next slide, we would like to show how the process of our development. It wouldn't be honest to say that we as Energy started this work in 2023. We actually started at that time. We did not yet have the law, so we started this work in a systemic way in 2015 when we started collecting all our professions, skills, titles, and with the TPS and KS, we looked at the grades of our companies and we came up with a big index that we managed to use for some time. And those who initiated this at that time, meaning that we need all the knowledge, collecting them in the in the whole of the area, we started making first steps in the realizing that we need to have a word in the national system of qualifications. And in the period of the pandemic and after the pandemic, we started developing as a consultation advisory board. And the employers that did not want to be involved in the process, because we conducted quite a lot of work about aimed at having major relationships. This was one of our major projects and number one for extent. So this work throughout this year, 2019, 2021, was about writing letters explaining why we need the involvement of the employers, not only ours, because it hadn't, we did not want it to look like here we have an association, these are our wishes. So, I mean, throughout these years, we had to conduct this kind of work. And only in 2023, we started, not a large scale work maybe, but we started realizing that the employers are finally with us, that they started understanding how important it is, I mean, making amendments to the labor legislation, because in parallel, we were discussing how it is going to reflect on taking the job, on construction of sites and many others. And we were also discussing how it is explaining how important it is in issues like compensation payments. And they started saying, yes, this is very important, this is very interesting. And we started, involving our members, developing methodologies, sending it to them, getting their opinion on that, to exactly ensure the involvement. Because a person, when they are involved, if they offer at least one word, at least one proposal, tomorrow they will treat this process with an understanding, not only criticism. And vice versa, if the person was not previously involved, they will only be critical, like why are you doing all this? So 2021, 22, 23 is exactly having our employers involved, being ready to be involved in the process. The next slide as well, we're just showing the last years. The law is issued. We are convening the members. We already got 45 representatives at one time, about 70 persons as of today, and we always are saying that we are not closing the admission. If we do not manage by the time of the order being issued, by the beginning of the year, you can get involved, you can write letters, and we can involve you as an expert in your sector. And here I would like to underline that all the developments have been done free of charge. We are motivating our employers in a way, saying that these documents are first of all for you. So now they are not saying who is going to pay for that, how it will go, how it is going to cost, how much time it is going to cost us. They will just understand that they will not have enough time to include all their qualifications. That's why they are in a hurry and trying to include all the possible qualifications they need, so that they are included in the national system of qualifications, because in some time the country is going to refuse from the tariff system of labor that was adopted in the Soviet Union. And that question is quite a vulnerable one for everyone. So these people are trying to invest, with their demands and with their requirements in the national system of qualifications. I'm being told that I have to finalize now. Yes, maybe please do some summary, because we do not have enough time for that. I can just skip most of the slides and just show the last one if possible. Just the last slide. Here the work that we are doing. So far, these are only two groups. This is research and mining, and that is work for transport and gas, transportation and gas. And if you go through the link, you will see how serious the work of the council is. It's just 30 seconds. It won't take a lot of time. I'm not sure if I can do it. I was told that it is possible to click on the link and activate it. Yes, if possible, please, let's do it. I mean, the person who's responsible for the presentation, please click on the link.
Ну, пока технически мы это сделаем, я действительно хочу подчеркнуть, что это
For the
очень
time being, I would like
очень
to really
показательно, что Казэнерджи
mention
выступает не
that
только
this
как
is really
представитель
impressive.
отрасли,
As Energy is not only
но как стратегический
representative of the
партнер
area, but also as a
государства
strategic
в
partner
модернизации
of the
системы
state
квалификации.
in the
Это
modernization
очень
of the
интересный,
system of
очень хороший
qualifications. It's
кейс
very interesting, a very nice
из
case
Центральной Азии. Я хотел
from
бы
Central
поздравить вас
Asia,
с
and we would
прекрасной
like
работой.
to
И
congratulate you
это очень
with
хорошее
the
начало.
excellent work that you
В
did. This is a very
общем,
nice start.
у
Well,
нас практически времени не
we
осталось,
basically
потому
do
что мои
not have
зрители
much time
думаю, что это
left.
будет очень интересная тематика и очень
Indeed, I was
интересная
right. This is a
презентация.
very
Хочу
interesting
поблагодарить
topic, very interesting
всех
presentation, and I
презентаторов.
would like to
Мы
thank
пошлем эти
all our speakers and
презентации, и
presenters.
вы
We will
можете
send
это
these
посмотреть
presentations out. You'll
спокойно
be
еще раз.
able to
Но
look
то, что я
through them
вижу, мы
again.
должны
But from
создать
what I see, we need to create
какой-то формат или платформу
a
и
format,
возможность,
some
чтобы обсудить
platform, a
все эти
possibility
вопросы,
for
особенно
to discuss
что мы
these
можем делать
all these
на
questions,
региональном уровне,
particularly
как
what
мы
we
можем
can do
это
at the
развивать,
regional
что
level, how we
приемлемо
can
для
develop it,
Центральной
what is
Азии, какие
acceptable
будут
for
первые
Central
шаги.
Asia, what would be the first steps.
Есть ли какие-нибудь
Do we have
возможности для регионального
any
сотрудничества? Может
chances
быть,
for
не образовать
regional
региональные
cooperation? Maybe
отраслевые
we could
органы,
make regional
но
sector councils,
как-то начинать
but
сотрудничество
we
на
need to
региональном уровне.
somehow
Это очень,
start
очень важно, и
cooperating
у
on the regional
Центральной
level. It's
Азии
very
уже
important, and we
механизмы, как
already have very important
национальные steering committee,
significant
regional steering
mechanisms
committee,
like
это
the
может стать
national, regional steering committees, and that could
объектом
be
обсуждения на этих
become
комитетах.
subject
Ну,
for
давайте
discussion at
возьмем
these
с собой
committees.
все эти
Okay,
вопросы,
let's
которые мы
take all
уже,
these questions that we have
которые крутятся, и здесь тоже мы
that are
видим,
in the
что
air,
уже между разными органами той же самой страны уже есть,
because we
начинается какая-то
already see that
дискуссия, это
between the
действительно
bodies and
очень
authorities
хорошо.
of different
Ну, в конце я
countries, there is
еще раз
already a lot of
поблагодарю
questions
всех
for discussion.
презентаторов,
And in the end, I would like
организаторов.
to
Это
once
была
again
очень
thank all the
интересная
organizers and the
вебинара и
speakers
всех
of this very
участников. И с
interesting
удовольствием
webinar, all
передаю
its
слово
participants.
Надежде
And it's my
Солодянкиной,
pleasure to
потому что
give the
она
floor to Nadezhda
заведует
Solidankina because
проекте
she
Дарья,
is
очень
the
важным
head of the
компонентом, который
Daria project, a very
создание
important
квалификации в
component in
разных
creation
странах. Надежда,
qualifications in
пожалуйста,
our countries. Nadezhda, please,
для ваш summary.
your summary.
Спасибо, Кахабер.
Thank you,
Я не
Kahaber.
знаю, насколько возможно запустить
I'm
ссылку, о
not
которой
sure if it is
говорила
possible
Лязат.
to launch the
Спрашиваю своих
link that
коллег.
the colleague was talking about.
Я думаю, что есть
I'm
какая-то
asking,
техническая
Какие-то
проблема. К
I think
технические
that
сожалению,
there
но
is
проблемы,
some
но я
если
думаю,
technical
что...
получится презентации, мы
difficulty
можем все открыть это.
with that.
Да,
But if we send out the presentation, I think that people
спасибо
will be able to open the
всем
link
уважаемым
individually. Yes,
спикерам.
that's
Действительно,
right.
наш вебинар подходит
Thank,
к концу,
thank you
и
to
мне кажется, он был очень
all the
насыщенный,
speakers. I think
очень
it was very
содержательный. Я хотела бы поблагодарить всех
intense,
спикеров и, конечно, нашего модератора Кахабера.
very
Это была очень ценная
informative,
информация.
and of course, thanks to our moderator
И
Krachaber,
поскольку на меня выпала такая честь
because I have this honor
подвести
of
итоги, я
making
бы
a summary
хотела добавить в
today.
заключение,
I would like to
что,
add
ну, наверное, на примере
in the end
стран,
that probably
опыт
the
которых мы сегодня
example of
рассмотрели,
countries
мы
that we
видим, как
saw
в
and
разных
heard
странах
today,
выстраиваются
you can see
механизмы
how different countries
взаимодействия с
build
частным
the
сектором.
mechanisms of cooperating,
Мы
interacting
увидели
with the
разные
private
типы
sector. We saw
задействованных организаций, институциональных
different
каналов,
types of involving different
процедур.
organizations, organizational
У
channels,
них разные функции, разные
procedures with
роли.
different
Да,
functions, different roles.
мы видели отраслевые советы,
We saw
отраслевые
sector
ассоциации,
councils, we saw
агентства
sector
налогов, промышленные
associations,
палаты. И как
skills
практически
agencies,
каждый
chambers of
сегодняшний
commerce.
спикер упомянул, действительно нет какого-то одного
And
правильного
really, one of the
пути.
speakers said quite
Все
right
многое
that
зависит
there is
от
no one absolutely right way.
сложившихся
it always depends on different circumstances like culture and economic environment. But what is important, mostly important, is to have systemic mechanisms in place that would ensure this link and interaction between the private system and lifelong education. And as we've seen on the different examples shown today, this interaction should go into different areas, penetrate them. This is a definition of skills that are in demand, forming the requirements to these skills, to the educational process. This is education of the private sector in the very system and process of education, and assessment skills as well. So I'd like to probably finalize this webinar by reiterating what we started from when Karina was having a word. She said that the quality of skills depends on how employers are, how the degree of involvement of employers in this system. And this is also important to ensure trust to the system of education, trust to the labor potential, labor resource, and the role of state authorities, I think, is exactly contributing to the creation of such mechanisms and such beneficial, fruitful environment for this activity. So this, I think, would be a good finalization for our webinar. And now I would like to ask Katarina, would you like to make some announcements for the future before we say goodbye to each other?
Yes, I won't, but if we have 3 minutes, there are two questions in the chat. Do you think we have some, Kaha, would you please read them? They're in Russian. There is one from Zafar, I think is Tuliazat, and then there is one Fazlidin for, I think, you, Nadia.
Один вопрос к Лизат. Какие механизмы международного партнерства и взаимодействия к донорам оказались
Question
наиболее
from Lizat:
полезными?
what mechanisms of interaction with donors were most efficient? This is a question to Kazenergy. If you could, in short, answer this question. Thank you for the possibility to answer the question. Yes, indeed, we as Kazenergy were involved in many projects to be able to understand what is qualification standard, what is framework, because for us it was something new, and it started from 2012, and we tried to collect everything in the system, everything that we could, and those were also the projects from the European Union, GIZ German project, and the last Daria. Now our objective as the council is to understand what is hyper qualification, and we need to deliver this message to our employers about what it is, how it's going to be implemented in our system, and what is needed from the employers, what mechanisms are going to be in place. So this is what we are doing with the Dalia project, especially when after we went to Piemonte, we were shown how it is going to be done, how it is done in practice, and I think that we will continue participating in everything that is going on in the country as Kazenergy, because in our sector we have more than about 400,000 people, and this is not even involving service organizations and subcontractor organizations. So for us, yes, it's very important. Thank you for your answer. And the second question, this was just a comment, but there is one interesting question that we can just organize a separate webinar for. What makes the employers to be involved? A very rhetorical question, but because we do not have one specific person to answer this, I will just try to do it. I will say that what business and economy expects from the government, from the state, is access to resources, access to technologies, access to finance, and the legislative base, particularly access to qualified workforce. Without that, nothing is going to be developing. So when the business understands that the labor force can develop only when they're involved in the process, I mean, this is the power. This is the something that makes them be involved in the qualification process. And we need to understand that we are paying taxes to the budget. This is something that finances the education, and we get our taxes back through the qualified workforce. This is maybe the main driving force, the main power that makes them. But yes, the question is very interesting and rhetorical in nature. May I add here just one sentence? You know what else pushes the sector to all the changes? If you have a strong trade union, if you are in contact working with your trade union, if they're stating their demands clearly, if when these requirements are always related to the working place, you will just not have another way out. We will continue cooperating with them and we will introduce the change. I would say that is not a motivator. That is a very nice, powerful mechanism. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you so much, Katarina.
Thank you, everybody. I am very happy to announce that the majority of the participants were able to stay until the end. I think that's the greatest result and of the discussions and interesting presentations. First of all, I want to thank the speakers of today. I want to thank the participants, and I want to propose that we can repeat this webinar in November. On November 18th, we will have a second webinar of this edition. And if there is something of particular interest to you, we would be happy to, of course, in the area of governance and the business education nexus, we would be happy to hear from you. And I would propose at the very last moment, who wants to maybe take a family picture, since this is the first webinar. Joanna, would you be able to take the screenshot? So maybe on 1, 2, 3, who else is still connected and want to give us a smile, we can take a picture. So let's wait a bit. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you very much, colleagues. It was great to see you, and I'm looking forward to see you next in November. Have a good afternoon.
Большое спасибо. До свидания.
Огромное спасибо.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Спасибо.